Ukraine just landed a brutal strike on Russian forces. And this wasn't any old strike. This was revenge that reduced the Russians who've targeted the Ukrainian city of Sumy to dust. This devastating counterattack delivers a clear message to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukraine won't sit idly by while Putin's forces kill its country's civilians. With this strike, Ukraine may have just taken out the forces Putin is relying upon to weaken the country's forces in Sumy and terrorize its civilians. And it gets even worse for Russia, as this most recent strike is just the first response Ukraine has made to Putin's attempts to devastate one of its biggest cities and its people. On Sunday, April 13, the residents of Sumy were waking up to mark Palm Sunday. The first day of the Holy Week of Christianity is meant to be a time for those who follow the faith to rejoice and celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Instead, Palm Sunday in Sumy became a catastrophe. Russia chose this holy day to start the largest missile strike it's launched so far in 2025, with the results being catastrophic for the residents of Sumy. Ballistic missiles tore through busy residential districts in the city, killing at least 35 people, many of whom were attending church to mark Palm Sunday. Among the dead were 2 children who were simply walking with their parents in the Sumy city centre. The attack also wounded at least 117 people. Ukraine is still investigating the strike, with preliminary information suggesting that Russia used cluster munitions in its attack. In other words, this was no precise strike that Russia attempted against a Ukrainian military installation. Cluster munitions break up in the air, releasing an array of small bomblets that allow them to cause damage over a wide area. Putin's goal was simple when he chose to use these type of missiles: kill as many Ukrainians as possible. It didn't matter to Russia's leader if those Ukrainians were soldiers or civilians. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky raged against Russia in the immediate aftermath of the Sumy assault. He told the press that one of Russia's ballistic missiles hit a university building in Sumy, which is far from a military target, while another exploded right over a street. Zelensky left no doubt in anybody's mind about what he believed to be the purpose of the Sumy attack. Russia wants exactly this kind of terror and is dragging out this war, Ukraine's president said. Without pressure on the aggressor, peace is impossible. Talking has never stopped ballistic missiles and bombs. We need to treat Russia as a terrorist deserves. Of course, Russia claims otherwise. Kremlin mouthpiece Dmitry Peskov claimed to reporters that Russia only strikes exclusively at military and near-military targets, before adding, "I can only repeat and remind you of the repeated statements of both our president and our army representatives. Russia is trying to paint what happened in Sumy as an attack against Ukrainian military targets. 35 dead civilians show it was anything but." In its own piece about the Sumy strike, The Guardian spoke to the families of Viktor Boyko and his wife Olha. On Palm Sunday, Viktor and Olha were enjoying a ride on a bus together as they made their way to church. Both pensioners, the couple aimed to reach the center of Sumy, with their bus passing by several buildings owned by Sumy State University. That's when the Russian missile struck. One of Russia's cluster munitions fell from the skies, exploding next to the bus. The Boykos were shredded by shrapnel, as were the bus's other passengers and several people strolling by. The blast was so powerful that it blew the windows and wooden doors off the Sumy University's Institute of Applied Physics, which was across the road from the bus. It was Palm Sunday, a holiday, a day off, said one Sumy resident named Tetyana. The weather had recently warmed up and people were on their way to church. We have a tradition in Ukraine that we buy willow branches. This is a huge sorrow for the whole city. We are grieving. In my opinion, this isn't an act of war, it's sheer terrorism. When reporters from The Guardian saw Viktor and Olha, the couple were dressed in their best clothes as they were being lowered into their graves. The outlet says that a priest sang songs and carnations were laid at Olha's feet as their caskets were lowered into the ground. The mood was somber. However, there was also a deep-seated desire for revenge fueled by anger. Olha's brother, Anatoly Prikodko, expressed the sentiment that now prevails in Sumy as he laid his sister and brother-in-law to rest. "Give me a weapon, any weapon. I want to kill those butchers in Moscow. They have murdered so many people, adults, kids, peaceful citizens. If you lose a house or a car in a war, you can get it back. If you lose a person, a loved one, they're gone forever. Stories like these showcase just how brutal Russia's recent attack on Sumy really was. Putin's mouthpieces lied about attacking military targets. Russia knew exactly what it was doing, and it got the results it wanted. Dozens of peaceful Ukrainians are now dead or injured after Putin ordered an attack on a city centre filled with everyday people. But Ukraine wouldn't let him get away with it. It couldn't. Revenge was needed for the people of Sumy, and that's precisely what Ukraine delivered on April 15. Before it could counterattack, Ukraine needed to answer some questions. Key among them was figuring out which Russian unit was responsible for the Sumy assault. Ukraine's defense intelligence got to work, with an investigation revealing that troops from 2 Russian brigades were behind the attack, the 112th Missile Brigade and the 448th Missile Brigade. Combined, the two fired Iskander-M and KN-23 missiles at Sumy, with the latter being provided by North Korea. With the targets identified on April 13, Ukraine's Chief of Defense Intelligence, Kirilo Budanov, delivered a succinct threat. "Our joint goal is to ensure that no war criminal, from those who gave the orders to those who launched the missiles, escapes accountability." On April 15, Ukraine delivered on Budanov's threat. Initial reports on Ukraine's counterattack came from Militani. It says that Ukraine's defense forces launched a strike that decimated the deployment point of the 448th Missile Brigade that Budanov's team identified as being the key unit behind the Sumy assault. That brigade had launchers stationed in the Kursk region, where Russia is currently still fighting to remove the remnants of the Ukrainian military that took several hundred square miles of that Russian oblast territory back in August 2024. Another launching site, this one belonging to the 112th Missile Brigade, was discovered in the Ivano region. It was the former that Ukraine hit. Militani only has preliminary reports on the strike. It says that units from the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Unmanned Systems Forces, Security Service of Ukraine, Ukrainian Defense Forces, and the Special Operations Forces combined to coordinate and execute a precise strike against the 448th Missile Brigade's position in Kursk. At the time of Militani's reporting, it was unknown just how much damage the counterattack wrought, with the outlet stating it was awaiting satellite photos to confirm what Ukraine achieved. More details came from a Sky News report on the counterattack. It revealed that the Ukrainian Armed Forces shared a message on the social media platform Telegram stating that its assault against the 448th Missile Brigade's base led to a hit and a secondary detonation of ammunition. Euromaidan Press suggested that Ukraine used its long-range drones to conduct the assault, also noting that the Russian media outlet Astra reported a series of explosions in Kursk overnight. Ukraine definitely unleashed a drone attack in the region, as Russia's defense ministry claims that the country's air defenses shot down 115 Ukrainian drones on the night of April 15, with 109 of them being destroyed over Kursk. As usual, Russia is trying to claim that Ukraine was unsuccessful in its counterattack. The multiple explosions recorded at the 448th Missile Brigade's base suggest otherwise. For now, that's all that's known about Ukraine's counterattack. But even from this limited information, it seems that Ukraine has just taken out one of the missile brigades responsible for the Sumy assault, with the odds being high that it'll target the other brigade very soon. That leads to a question. What has Ukraine just achieved? For one, it looks like Ukraine has just destroyed one of the most important tactical missile brigades the Russian army has at its disposal. The 448th Missile Brigade was formed in 1987 and originally stationed in East Germany towards the tail end of the Soviet era. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the brigade remained and transferred to become part of the new Russian military. Stationed in Kursk, the brigade was initially equipped with Russia's OTR-21 Toshka missiles before those were replaced with the Iskanders that ultimately rained down on Sumy. So this isn't some new missile unit Putin created after his Ukraine invasion. It's among the oldest that modern Russia has, and it's been used throughout the Ukraine war to cause serious damage to Ukrainian defenses. And while unconfirmed, Ukraine's strike on April 15th may have killed key members of the 448th Missile Brigade, potentially reducing its capacity to launch future attacks on Sumy. What is confirmed is that Ukraine says that it destroyed one of the 448 Missile Brigade's ammunition stockpiles. And with that destruction goes at least some of the Iskander-M and KN-23 missiles the brigade launched at Sumy. Both are terrifying missiles. The Iskander-M, which NATO designates as Stone, is a road-mobile surface-to-surface ballistic missile that has a range of about 310 miles. That makes it roughly equivalent to the Storm Shadow and ATACMS missiles Ukraine receives from its Western partners, though the Iskander-M can travel a little further. The missile is especially dangerous because it can be loaded with either conventional or nuclear warheads weighing up to 1,543 pounds. That alone showcases why Russia's Sumy strike was able to achieve such terrible results. These aren't small cruise missiles. Iskander-Ms pack an enormous amount of firepower, with their presence in the Kursk region also allowing Putin to maintain a vague nuclear threat against Ukraine. He hasn't fired Iskander-Ms carrying nuclear warheads yet, but the possibility remains for as long as the 448 Missile Brigade has these missiles in its arsenal. Russia also can't claim that these missiles were accidentally fired at a Ukrainian civilian center. Army recognition says that each of these missiles is equipped with navigational systems that make them accurate to within 22 feet of a target. Those systems are reinforced by an optical homing head and autonomous applications that reduce the accuracy down to between 98 and 229 feet from the intended target. In the world of precision missiles, that isn't a large margin for error, and the Iskander-M being so precise proves once and for all that Russia struck exactly where it intended in Sumy. The missiles didn't go off track, they're too accurate for that. As for the KN-23, that missile comes from North Korea, and it's not dissimilar from the Iskander-M. Like the Iskander-M, the KN-23 is a road mobile ballistic missile that's capable of carrying both conventional and nuclear warheads. The big difference, at least when it comes to warheads, is that the KN-23 is limited to 1,102 pounds, which is around 400 pounds less explosive power than is packed into the Iskander-M. The KN-23 makes up for that reduction in power with a more impressive range than its Russian equivalent. The missile can travel between 149 and 428 miles, depending on the variant, which gives Russia more options for its long-range assaults. Missile Threat says that the KN-23's similarity to the Iskander-M suggests that North Korea may have relied on Russian assistance to develop the missile. That, combined with the cooperative defense pact Russia and North Korea signed in 2024, explains why it would be found in a 448th Missile Battalion Ammunition Storage Unit at all. Interestingly, there also seems to be some doubt, expressed by both Missile Threat and the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance, over whether North Korea has entered the missile into service. Perhaps it hasn't, but it appears that Russia has. Regardless, these are two very dangerous missiles, as the attack in Sumy demonstrated. And by taking out stockpiles of both, Ukraine has just completed a devastating counterattack that also highlights the different approaches each side takes to damage the other. Russia uses its missiles and drones both to attack Ukrainian infrastructure and to terrorize its opponent's citizens. Ukraine, on the other hand, focuses its strikes predominantly against key Russian military targets to weaken Putin's war machine. Russia managed to kill 35 Ukrainian civilians. The payback it received was the loss of the very valuable missiles it used in the Sumy assault, along with the potential destruction of the 448th Missile Brigade. And it's bound to get worse for Putin. In the wake of the Sumy strike, Ukraine vowed revenge. Taking out one of the units that conducted that strike was just the start. More is coming, both on the offensive and defensive sides. Take the Kursk drone assault from April 15. Yes, that attack targeted a Russian missile team. However, Ukraine's drones also assaulted the larger Kursk region. Russia's claims about that drone assault contradict themselves. While it claims to have shot down every drone Ukraine launched, it also says that Ukraine's counterattack killed at least one person and injured another 9. How would that be possible if the aerial threat was eliminated? It wouldn't, which shows us that Ukraine's reports about taking out the 448 Missile Brigade are likely accurate. With the Kursk strikes, Ukraine also reinforces a message that is delivered to Putin several times during the Ukraine invasion. Russia isn't safe. ABC News war correspondent Tom Sufi Burridge said as much when reporting on the Kursk attacks.
Ukraine, I think, is still trying to take the war into Russia to demonstrate to the Russian people that this war is not just about a conflict in Ukraine, that it will have implications for Russia, for its economy and for its people.
He's not wrong. Ukraine's message, as it has been for at least a year, is that it can fight fire with fire whenever Putin unleashes one of his terroristic assaults. As for the defensive side of Ukraine's game plan, it's cooking up something that may soon make it much harder for Russia to inflict the kind of damage it achieved in Sumy, a brand new missile defense system. On April 14, only days after the Sumy attack, the Kyiv Independent revealed that Ukraine's evolving defense industry is working on the creation of a new strategic-level air defense system. The system was announced by the country's foreign minister, Andrei Sybiha, during a speech delivered to the European Union's Foreign Ministers' Council. Sybiha didn't reveal many details about the upcoming system, likely because he didn't want to give the game away to Russia and allow it to come up with a way to counter Ukraine's plans. However, we have some hints as to what it might involve. For instance, Ukraine entered negotiations with the United States back in January to obtain a license to build Ukrainian versions of some US air defense systems.
And we've had talks with the US about licensing the production of air defense systems and missiles here in Ukraine, and this could become a significant part of our security guarantees, and it's absolutely doable.
Zelensky's claims seem accurate, at least in terms of manufacturing being possible. Since Putin invaded in February 2022, Ukraine's domestic defense manufacturing industry has grown by leaps and bounds. In 2022, that industry was producing just $1 billion in weapons for Ukraine's defenses. By 2024, the figure rose to $9 billion, and it's expected to explode in 2025. Ukraine anticipates building at least $35 billion of weaponry by the end of the year. That growth suggests that Ukraine has put a lot of work into creating the types of manufacturing facilities it needs to build air defense weapons it has on licenses from the US. Assuming that licensing goes through, Putin's missile strike may soon face Ukrainian anti-air defenses that are far less scattered and much more capable of taking out Russia's missiles and drones. Ukraine's goal is to make a situation like what happened in Sumy impossible. It isn't there yet, but as Sybiha revealed, it's working toward that situation. Still, those defenses are something for the future, meaning Ukraine can only respond to Russia's attacks with strikes of its own right now. And to keep up those attacks, enabling it to counter against units like the 448 Missile Brigade, Ukraine needs support from NATO and the United States. Support from the former is practically a given. On April 15, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte met with Zelensky at a hospital in Odessa. There, Rutte affirmed NATO's unwavering support for Ukraine, adding that, "I'm here today because I believe Ukraine's people deserve real peace, real safety and security in their country, in their homes." Support from the US is less stable. The rollercoaster relationship between Zelensky and US President Donald Trump took another turn in the wake of the Sumy attacks. Rather than condemning the terroristic assault, as most of Ukraine's other allies did, Trump instead focused on what he saw as the reason behind the war starting.
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is, we had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. And Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have never started it. Everybody's to blame. Listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles.
Trump's comments are as much of a roller coaster as his relationship with Zelensky, though he now appears to be laying at least some of the blame for the war at Ukraine's feet. His missile comments also allude to a proposal made by Zelensky that Ukraine was willing to spend several billions of dollars on US-made Patriot missiles and batteries, which may link to its desire to build its own air defense systems. Right now, the US isn't willing to make the sale. That calls into question just how dedicated the US is in terms of providing the ongoing support Ukraine needs to counter assaults such as the one that took place in Sumy. Zelensky has asked Trump to visit Ukraine so he can see the devastation the country endures firsthand. It remains to be seen whether Trump will accept. But for now, Ukraine has just struck a terrific blow against Russia's missile forces in response to Putin's actions in Sumy. More may be coming, and if Zelensky can bring the US back on his side, Putin's Sumy attack may have just sounded the death knell for his faltering Ukraine invasion. But what do you think about what Putin did in Sumy and Ukraine's response? Are we going to see more missile strikes against Ukraine civilians in the future? What else can Ukraine do to weaken Russia's missile battalions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more news on the Ukraine war. We're an independent source of information about military conflicts around the globe and greatly appreciate your support.